everybody, this is Eric with Off-Road Independence again. Sorry, I got my finger in the camera. And today we're going to talk a little bit about a project that I'm continuing, which is my bumper. And I'm going to show you a little bit about what I'm doing to prepare it, because if you remember the last time I showed the video, I had already painted my bumper with bed liner. And one of the great things about bed liner is that it covers a lot of mistakes, but it also requires not all, let me rephrase that. One of the great things about bed liner is it's easy to apply, and another great thing about it is that it covers a lot of mistakes. So you don't have to be as worried about pristinely finishing it or doing detailed sandings to a fine grit like you would with automotive paint. However, there is a challenge with it too, and this is what I'm going to show you now. The challenge that you have with it is that when you are going to rework it or revamp what you've already done, you have to prepare it well so that you can weld or whatever it may be that you're trying to do. And in the past, when I worked in the automotive shop doing auto body and paint, I also sprayed bed liner. Now, the bed liner I sprayed in the auto body shop was hot spray, which is like a Line-X or one of those kind of companies where it actually comes in the 2-part 55-gallon drum, passes through a machine that heats it up, and then it sprays it. And that stuff is, it's a lot better than the spray can stuff, okay? I'm not even gonna lie about that. But they both have similar aspects to them once they've cured well. One of the things about the hot spray is that it cures pretty quickly. The stuff about the deal about the spray can bed liner is that it dries much slower. It cures much slower. But once it's cured, it's pretty good. It's not as durable, but it's pretty good. So you still have to get down to the metal again if you're going to do any kind of welding or if you're going to do any kind of add-ons or anything like that. Well, you may just think, well, let's just sand it off, right? That's what you do. Well, sanding it, all it does is really clogs up your sanding disc. So in this in this aspect, you have to kind of figure out how to get the paint off or the bed liner off so that you can actually work with it. And that's what I've done. Over the years of working at the automotive shop, I found that the best way to get this stuff off and to get it down to a workable metal, and clearly since I'm working on the edges here, it's easier, but one of the best ways is to take a blade knife or a box cutter or whatever and just literally scrape it, and it just pulls all of that stuff off and it leaves it down to the metal. Now once you've done with that, you can go back with a angle grinder with a grinding disc on it, or you can go back with a wire wheel on an angle grinder and get what little residual there is left off. Clearly, when you're trying to do flat surfaces like this area here, it's a lot more work to get it taken off with a razor blade. Still, it can be done, and personally, that's the fastest way that I found it to be able to, or the fastest way I've found to be able to take it off. Now, understand, you're going to waste a lot of well, not waste, but you're going to use a lot of razor blades. That's just the way it is. But it is a really good way to get that stuff off so that you can work with it in the future. All right, so one of the big things that, as I'm sure you know, when you're getting a project ready, you always want to kind of pre-think the steps you're going to make, try to plan them out the best you can, and that'll help you to be able to figure out the best way of doing what it is that you're trying to do for the project, of course, and it'll make it the most efficient as well. Plus, it'll probably turn out to be just a better project overall. And that's exactly what I've done with this project here. For instance, what I did this time was I took the pieces that I needed for the sides, the wings, because if you recall, the wings were open like this, right? And I said that I didn't want that. That's not the look that I wanted. So what I did was I cut pieces to fit on the sides of the wings like this. And if those side wings look kind of ugly with the welds, it's because I haven't cleaned up the welds yet, and I'm using a flux core MIG, which doesn't really leave the prettiest looking welds before you clean them up. Once you clean them up, a lot of times they look a lot better. Well, at least if you welded correctly. So here, before I did all that welding and before I did everything else, I had already gone and cut out this piece here, and I cut out 2 of them, as you can see here. And the reason I cut these out is because these fit on those wing pieces, and this side here I've already bedlined. And the reason I've already bedlined this side here with the spray can is because this is the inside, and the outside, the side that I'm actually welding on, is still metal. So what I'll do now is, as you can see here, I've stripped the bed liner off the edges where I'll be welding it to it. Now I'll go back and I will put this, you know, on there and then weld it like I did the other side. Then I'll clean it all up and put bed liner back on it. So one thing I wanted to make sure that I mentioned to you guys is that when you're doing this kind of work, especially with this thin gauge metal like I'm using to close in the edges, which is only around 0.90 thick wall, and while it's not real super thin, it is thin enough to be that it can cause some serious warping issues and that kind of stuff. Also, depending on if the metal had come in a little bit of a warped state itself, it may not lay flat on whatever it is that you're trying to do. So what I'm doing here is, of course, I welded the end piece there of the metal so that it would stay flat. And now I am clamping it, and I'm also hammering on it to make sure that it meets as flush as possible to that piece of metal there. And it's keeping it as flush up against the rail as possible. And then I'll start welding from this end, tacking a strip, skipping, tacking a strip while I'm maintaining it clamped, and I'm forming it with the hammer. I'm just using a little roofing hammer with a flat, smooth nose on it. But if you have body dollies and hammers, it's better, because that way it'll actually flatten it out more. I don't have those, and when I went to look for them, nobody had the hammers in stock that I was looking for. So you can get away with it, but what I have to do with the household hammer, the roofing hammer, or carpenter's hammer, whatever you want to call it, is I have to actually feed it closer. Like, I have to hammer it literally every inch of the, well, not every inch, but like I have to hammer it sequenced all the way down to keep it flat, because the tip of the hammer isn't exactly flat, it's a little rounded, and that can make it warp out. So you have to do that, and do it in short strips. Don't do it in long strips, so that when you do it, it stays flat against there. Tack weld it, then take the clamp off, and then move it down and do it again.